Good morning, everyone. So the maritime sector has been identified as an area of growth opportunity. And what you're seeing on the board there is a classic offloading operation. And you're seeing a vessel, a very small vessel to the side. And I'm going to pay particular attention to that small vessel, because a vessel of that size providing services in our energy sector, usually, well, we call it charter in the maritime sector, but it's rented at a rate of approximately $42,000 to $50,000 US per day. So I really long for the day when we can state just how much of the GDP the maritime sector contributes to Trinidad and Tobago. The sector is very much unmapped, very much unexplored. So therefore, it presents a brilliant opportunity for us within the university, being the only unique maritime campus in the region, to begin this mapping process. So last year, with respect to the budget, we spoke in this very theater about shipbuilding and ship repair as an avenue of growth. We spoke about an open registry. Well, the open registry caused a lot of confusion in the maritime sector, because those of us within the sector is very much aware that in order to open your registry, you must have a very advanced legal framework capable of regulating vessels who are willing to register in your country. Having said that, Trinidad and Tobago is not a traditional ship-owning state. So therefore, this created a bit of confusion in most maritime stakeholders. And in the shipbuilding and ship repair sector, we've seen that the budget this year tend to focus on that area without mentioning the open registry. So we'll return to that discussion, but let's look at what is being said with respect to the open registry. Sorry, the shipbuilding industry. In the budget statement, the Honorable Minister referred to us leveraging our assets in the Northwest Peninsula. Well, the maritime campus is in the Northwest Peninsula, so I look forward to that. But I'm also aware that some of the repairs, and most of the repairs being effected in our naval assets, takes place in the Chaguaramas Peninsula. What is a little bit concerning is that if we're going to leverage this maintenance with respect to naval assets, we have to consider who is the service provider. Currently, the major service providers are not Trinidadian companies. Another aspect of this that is a bit concerning is that this is being used as an initial catalyst for the rollout of the maritime industry. Now, this really pigeonholes the maritime industry, because the maritime industry is a lot more than just ship repair. There was also mention of a dry docking facility, which is more or less in the same vein as ship repair. It's a mechanism for facilitating ship repair. But in order for us to succeed in this endeavor of becoming a premium ship repair provider, not just to Trinidad, because we're not a ship-owning state, but to the region, and to attract the players, the transit, the shipping companies that transit our oceans, we have to, in fact, ensure that we have the available specialized skill sets, because many persons will not allow certain persons that claim to be certified in Trinidad near their vessel. I've had first-hand experience of this, where I was involved in negotiating 4 tugs to be built in Trinidad, and to work in Trinidad, and the provider said that, our quality is just not good enough. So although we are bringing the vessels to Trinidad, the closest we would get to having those vessels built will actually be in Cuba. That's very distressing as a Trinidadian to hear this. An accessible market. This will perhaps come with us getting into a joint venture partnership with someone who's already involved in ship repair and shipbuilding to a lesser extent. And that usually comes with a major international player. But in the maritime sector, we have seen a distressing trend where the ambition for us should be that we should buy out the joint venture partner, the multilateral corporation that comes to Trinidad to build our skills. But we have been seeing that where the multilateral partner is buying out the Trinidad partners. So this does not bode well for expansion in our maritime industry. As I mentioned before, the open registry, a major success factor, is a robust legal and regulatory framework. The current status with respect to that, well, it's a no-go currently. The concept of the open registry is not included in current amendments to the shipping amendment bill that is currently underway. Consultations are currently in progress with respect to how do we transform our maritime regulatory framework. And at a consultation on this last week, the director of the MSD said that that will be a subject for another study to actually determine whether it is in fact feasible to open the Trinidad and Tobago registry in light of very established open registries operating within the Caribbean region. In the past, with respect to the strategic development of the maritime sector, there were 4 areas highlighted and has been the subject of some study by the Ministry of Trade. The possibility of exploring ship ownership in Trinidad, shipbuilding and repair, well, we seem to have zeroed in on that one. Marine construction. Now, this is a very confusing bullet because marine construction can mean manufacture of anything going on board a vessel, or marine construction in terms of port infrastructure. But, you know, we remain confused because we have not had the studies that would inform us how to really capitalize. We know we have to improve our infrastructure, but to what extent and to what benefit? Transshipment. Now, this means different things to different persons. We have a very big transshipment operation taking place in the Gulf of Paria. Transshipment also means that you are a port where you're transshipping containers from this country to its ultimate destination. Where in order to do that, you have to be attracted by the shipping lines to a very efficient manner of handling, processing, and clearing cargo so that it can be an efficient turnaround in the ports. Unfortunately, whether it's because of infrastructural challenges, human resource challenges, we rank very low in terms of the turnaround time in the port, not just internationally, but even in the region. Jamaica has a turnaround time of 3 minutes for a container to be offloaded on a vessel. In Trinidad, we're lucky if we get 3 containers off in an hour. So, investing in the maritime industry, but where exactly? There's a lot of uncertainty as to how do we invest in it. Governments have been saying that they want to build this industry, but exactly how? How do we achieve this? Well, the first thing we need to know is define it. Defining the maritime sector is somewhat difficult because no one really knows what constitutes it. And it's certainly not just, we do know it's just not only the shipbuilding and ship repair sector. So I looked to what other economies do, primarily the UK, and Oxford Economics, that publishes an annual report on the contribution of different sectors of their society. They define the UK's maritime sector as the activity of UK ports, shipping, and maritime business services industries. In Trinidad, we are yet to define that and quantify that, because when previous presenters were putting up the contributions of the various areas in the economy and their contribution to GDP, maritime was not featured there. So what we're seeing there, most persons would recognize this as a platform. And you're seeing a small vessel, and that vessel is integral to the success and operation of that platform. It's an offshore supply vessel. And I promise that we will begin talking about offshore supply. Of those 4 areas that I mentioned before, I can't exactly go into each one, but I will focus on the offshore supply industry. Because when you start looking at the figures and the charter rates of these vessels, and we have some of the major international players operating in Trinidad and Tobago waters, I think we're really missing the boat on a multi-billion-dollar industry. Just roughly calculating some of the vessels that I know off the top of my head and looking at what they were chartered for based on information we have since 2008, it's an educated guess to say that this industry is worth in excess of $1.2 billion US. How many Trinidadians are a part of that operation? How many Trinidad companies are a part of that operation? The current operators that are wholly owned by Trinidad and Tobago are very small operators, and they do operate in the periphery of this offshore supply industry. So, one of the reasons for perhaps the lack of investment by locals into becoming ship owners is really because of also financing. This plays a critical role in you being able to access a market. Financiers do not act without data, so it becomes a catch-22. Without the data to back up your research proposals and your business proposals, you will find that financiers are very wary of financing mobile assets and floating assets as well. What we also need to have is a strong maritime regulator. We are on our way to having a maritime regulator. How robust and strong that institution is very highly dependent on what we do in the current drafts of the shipping reform bill. What is the required growth matrix? Well, a lot of people say legislation is not a driver, and it's not. But initially, if we are to become a strong maritime regulating institution, if we're to have a strong maritime institution, a regulator, it will be a driver in perhaps a short to medium term, as there will be a lot of companies being forced to implement the international standards, to have their vessels surveyed and inspected, to achieve compliance, to achieve the certification. So the regulator can be a preliminary driver in the short to medium term as we anticipate when the international standards are implemented in Trinidad, there will be a scramble to certify to ensure trading. And of course, with a strong maritime regulator, you also build investor confidence so that you know that when you finance a vessel and if there's an insurance claim that the vessel has sunk, it is in fact a credible claim, that your regulator is able to verify that. And not what has occurred in the past where after the insurance was paid out, the vessel turned up 2 years later in Jamaica. So these are the things that makes our financial institutions very wary of financing vessels on floating assets in general. They're highly mobile. So we mentioned transshipment before. Growing the maritime industry, transshipment is very important to us as a growth sector if we were to underscore that port rationalization is a necessary prerequisite to transshipment. So what are our current constraints? Geographical, the Port of Spain, where does it expand to? Human resource constraints, some people say it's a cultural issue. Inadequate infrastructure. Regulatory reform with respect to customs processing, this is absolutely necessary. Crime or porous maritime borders undermine the growth of certain areas in the maritime industry. Areas of potential, towage. We have towage contracts here that we can leverage to build and specialize in perhaps LNG towage so that we can become a premium LNG towage provider across the world. But we are slow to recognize these opportunities. Offshore supply, I mentioned in excess of $1.2 billion US, but not many local players are involved. Maritime business services, freight forwarding, stevedoring, chandlery services, vessel management. These are some of the areas in the maritime industry that are very much undersubscribed, cornered by a couple of key players, and they are not really expanding or improving in their efficiency. So how do we develop and sustain our maritime industry? Well, the maritime industry is highly international. So therefore, we need to exceed international benchmarks in our respective maritime fields. We need to take advantage of the current availability of internationally accredited and recognized degrees currently available in Trinidad and Tobago and in UTT, the Northwest Campus in particular. We need to do our homework. We need to do our research and our risk analysis into each of the various areas so that we can, in fact, make informed decisions. So that when we approach a banking institution for financing in the maritime sector, it is something that they can, it's not at all risk averse. It becomes a no-brainer. Currently, we don't enjoy that because of the lack of research and the lack of data in the area. Thank you.